gubernatorial candidate Mike Folk joins us on Metro News Talkline. Hey, Mike, how are you?
Good. How you doing, Robbie?
I'm well, thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. First of all, Mike, if you were the governor, I'm sure that you would be asked for your reaction to the protests that have occurred in West Virginia, which have been largely peaceful, and your thoughts or insights as to what happened in Minneapolis, and how you might handle things if you were the chief executive. What are your thoughts about what has happened and the protests in West Virginia?
Well, I mean, George Floyd, from all reporting that I've seen, I've been on the road a lot in southern West Virginia this weekend and all last week too. But the old saying, a couple bad apples can spoil a whole bushel is the way I would describe that. And George Floyd was obviously a civil rights violator. They basically, it looks to me like they've already charged the one police officer, the one that had his knee on his neck, with third-degree murder. And so, the legal system will hopefully take care of that issue. But as far as the protest nationwide, it's obviously been coordinated by some groups that are basically disparaging the death of Mr. Floyd by doing some of the stuff that they're doing. Now, this isn't happening in West Virginia from what I've seen. What reports I've seen is, for the most part, these have been good civil, exercising of your First Amendment rights in West Virginia. Now, I did see in Martinsburg a little video where they had shut the street down in front of the city hall, and then I've had some people send me information that supposedly, and I haven't seen the details or even the reporting of it, but there were shots fired in Martinsburg last night. But we have seen nothing, and I think a lot of it's because of the nature of our people. We have very good people in the state of West Virginia, and they haven't been importing out-of-state people like the reports have been showing in these other various major cities around the country.
Mike, if you were governor, do you believe that race or racial disparities is something that would have to be addressed? West Virginia does not have a large minority population, about 3 to 4% black. Is that something that would concern you as governor, and is that something that you think the state should do something about?
Yeah, I was in various towns over the weekend, Matewan, Williamson, and it is what you make of it. In other words, some people want to make an issue of it, but I have a lot of friends of all nationalities where I work, and in my travels in West Virginia, and they all treat me like a person. You need to be treated like any other person. And you need to start remembering that there, in my opinion, there is only one race, and it's called the human race. And if you treat each other properly, you'll get it back in spades. So that's the way I believe. Government intervention in some respects. I'm not the perfect person to talk about this, and anybody that is so-called white is probably not the person you should have on. The person you should have on is like a Burgess Owens, a man that played in the NFL. He's run up for Congress now, but he has a different take on it than the Soros-funded crowd. Let me put it that way.
Mike Folk Mike Folk is with us, Republican candidate for governor in the state of West Virginia. Mike, how do you think the governor and his team have handled the pandemic? And if you were governor, would you have handled it differently? And if so, how so?
Well, first of all, I didn't have access to as much information that he has, but I will tell you, I think if you talk to any small business owner in the state of West Virginia, what they, to a person, tell me is that it's a moving target. And the reality is, in the initial shutdown, they shut it down because they wanted to flatten the curve. And then about 5 or 6 weeks ago, you had both Albert Wright and Clay Marshall on, head of WVU Medicine, head of WVU Medical School, and they both said to you that we can handle any surge. So if that's the case, why is the state of West Virginia still partially shut down? And I'll give you, and it's being done, it's not being done across the board fairly, enforced fairly, and I'll give you one example. There's a dirt racetrack, and I was just over there this past weekend, in Beckley, West Virginia, that is not allowed to open with spectators, even 50% spectators, but yet one in Tyler County is allowed to be open. So this makes no sense. The business owners can't keep track of all the different various rules that are being made by a one-person ruler that makes the final decision. And even oftentimes, the biggest thing I would do different is be honest with the people and make sure when you do put what he calls guidelines, which if it's a guideline, it's not mandatory. So how can you then go back and try to, for instance, in Berkeley County, in southern Berkeley County, a 71, 72-year-old barber was arrested, sole proprietor, because he had one person he was bringing one person at a time in his shop. Some of these guidelines are just absolutely ludicrous.
Mike Folk is with...
They make no medical sense. They make no logical sense.
All right, let me move on to a couple other things. Mike Folk is with us, Republican candidate for governor in West Virginia. Mike, you say on your website that you support removing government waste, lowering taxes where West Virginia is not competitive with other states. One of the taxes that you want to get rid of is the equipment and inventory tax. Now, that would require a constitutional amendment, I believe. And so, A, you support that, and B, if you got rid of that, that brings in about $100 million a year, and about 2/3 of that goes to schools and about 1/3 to counties. So how would you replace that revenue if you would replace that revenue?
Well, first of all, the first thing everybody needs to know, it's not a zero-sum game. If you drive Route 2 from Chester to Huntington, you can look right across the river, or the Ohio River, and you'll see all kinds of development taking place. But yet, in West Virginia, we've got concrete pads where there used to be a building, but just not paying anything in taxes relative to when it had a commercial building on it. And Ohio and Pennsylvania do not have that tax. So we need to allow this, and we've already given... That's how we get the big businesses here. The P&Gs of the world, they get pilot programs. They don't pay equipment and inventory taxes. We need a fair across-the-board tax system that makes West Virginia competitive. So when you get rid of those taxes, you have entrepreneurs starting businesses here. I have two examples of existing businesses. One thinking about leaving, Woolwood Tool up near Wheeling. They can literally go across the Ohio River, and they've been around since the mid-1800s. So you would prevent some businesses from leaving. I got another friend in high school that runs a machining business. You know, these CNC machines and stuff are like $250,000 up to $1 million a piece. So it's not a zero-sum game. I spent the whole weekend driving southern West Virginia. Concrete pads in these once booming towns that no longer have buildings on them don't pay taxes like a commercial building does. So it's not a zero-sum game. You might have to phase it out over a 4 or 5 year period, but for new investment, you pass it. For new investment, whether it's new investment in a brand new business or new investment as in expanding a business, we need to get rid of that tax.
Are you saying, Mike? Hey, Mike, are you saying that removing that tax would pay for itself and increase business? Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. If it didn't, why are we doing all these pilot programs? If you take the economic development argument of doing these pilot programs, that in the long run they're economically beneficial to our state, then why aren't we doing it statewide for every size business?
Mike, when you were in the legislature, you talked a lot about government waste, but where do you think specifically is the most waste, and what would you do about that?
There's a lot of waste. Let me give you one example of waste. Everybody talks about the administration talks about the roads to prosperity and how this is going to make West Virginia a great place. Well, let's talk about one piece of waste within that program, and I can't put a dollar figure on it, but it's an important concept to understand. If you drive any back road, and I thought this was just an anomaly when I first saw it, but you drive a lot of back roads in the state of West Virginia, and you'll see. I was just on a radio station in Logan County. The fellow, the host there, had his example of seeing one of these signs. You'll see these little signs, Roads to Prosperity Project. And in his case, he said right next to that sign was a pothole, a huge pothole that you could almost lose yourself in. And we're spending who knows how much money putting signs up, the government, to say we're doing Roads to Prosperity, when the money that they've spent to put those signs up would have been better spent fixing potholes or fixing slips We've got priorities, and as an example, the DOH really screwed up. We're repaving some roads that were paved 2 years ago, but yet a slip along Route 2 in Mason or Jackson County has not been fixed. It's a one-way stoplight. Has not been fixed in 18 months that I've been driving the state. That's the difference. I will prioritize things and cut the fat, drain the swamp in Charleston, because it is a swamp. There's so much self-dealing. And they've got DOH is a perfect example. We've got a $400 million lawsuit that's been ongoing since about the time Justice took office. And there's been no resolution of that lawsuit. That was a $4 million lawsuit against West Virginia Paving for overcharging for asphalt. Why hasn't that been...
Mike, let me get one other question here before time runs out. Mike, you say that you support, quote unquote, fair pay for teachers. Teachers struck twice in the last 2 years. One of the primary issues was about benefits, and pay was in there too. Certainly, pay was a big part of it. Do you think teachers did the right thing or the wrong thing by striking, which contributed significantly to them getting a pay raise?
Well, I'm not going to decide the teacher's motives. Some of them probably did it for the right reason. Some of them did it for the wrong reason. And what I will tell you is the primary thing was not pay then. And this is an issue that we could talk about, and I talked about a lot when the show I was just on in Logan. We need to get health care costs, and this isn't for public employees. We need to get health care costs under control in the state of West Virginia. We can't keep throwing more money in a bottomless pit. And the way you do that is something with what Indiana did. Indiana saved 75%, which in the state of West Virginia would equate to $450 million TEIA savings by doing a couple things. One of the things is price transparency. When you go to buy a car, you know what the sticker price is. When you go to buy healthcare services, you have no idea until you get your thing from the insurance company or the hospital. We need to. So they provided transparency, and the other thing they did is they provided a major medical plan for their employees, and then they fully funded an HSA, which put the decision making back to the consumer, the patient, and between the patient and the doctor. That would save hundreds of million dollars. I know we're not exactly like Indiana. They have an older population, less healthy population, and that would also help our private sector healthcare employers and employees. And we could save hundreds of millions of dollars, and that money would be better spent on creating an economy and an environment for an economy in West Virginia that we start growing again, and we have to stem the population loss.
All right, Mike Folk, Republican candidate for governor, state of West Virginia. Mike, it's good to have you on. Be safe on the campaign trail, and we'll talk again.